Hey, let's check in on Bro Cuomo for a while, a.k.a. Fredo over at CNN. Is a journalist or a commentator? I don't know. We should ask CNN media relations that. Bunch of jerk. But here he is, and I got to tell you, this is getting me kind of excited. When Cuomo starts talking like this, play clip 5.
His message is take reality with the pandemic as reality. That's why he's been hesitant out on the hustings, because it's a weird mixed message. If you bring people into a group where they can get exposed, how are you about recognizing the pandemic? That's why his crowds look like this in Florida today. You got them masked up, their distance, some are sitting in their cars. This is a new era, right? I mean, we know rallies are not a good thing, so it's like the era of the drive-in rally. Now, Trump is literally surreality. It is surreal. If he wins, it is a figurative middle finger to math and to COVID, an acceptance of the is what it is recklessness as this virus continues to wreck us.
It is an extended middle finger, but it's mostly to the media, the libs, and the Democrats. So he was close. But I love that. To math also. Where was the extended middle finger commentary from Cuomo when there were thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, when you add up all the different cities, gathering together all summer for BLM protests? Remember that? Oh, but that was important. Yeah, that's delusional. It was destructive, and it was based in lies, but important, they tell you. Yeah, that's pretty fun, isn't it? They act like we don't remember this. They really, to believe the left-wing talking points on COVID, you just have to not have a memory. That's very important. You have to forget what you've been told for the last year, what they've been saying, and what has been actually happening all around you. That's something that you must do. For example, I mean, Chris Cuomo continues here with his version of why people don't want to wear masks. Play 6.
Look, vote your conscience. Vote for Biden. Vote for Trump. As long as it's fair and they're counted, works for me. But please don't see defying masks as a way of showing support for Trump. Don't get yourself sick to show a sign of support. And look, the same people who want to come after me for going for runs without a mask, and look, that's fair. That's fair. I don't wear the mask. People should call me out on it. I'm okay with that. But the same people are neglecting to tell you that this president is putting you in jeopardy. That's the true hypocrisy.
No, he doesn't seem to understand here that for a whole lot of us, I don't want to wear a mask because I don't want to wear a blinking mask. That's why. And the reasons are that it is annoying, uncomfortable, and I don't think it does very much to protect me in a whole lot of circumstances where I'm currently required to. In fact, I know it is pointless in many of the circumstances in which I'm currently required to wear one. So it is a demand of subservience to anxiety, control, and stupidity out there that has overtaken the public. That's why. It's actually not about Trump. I would not want to wear a mask, even if, by the way, Trump has been saying wear masks. He tells people wear a mask. He's been saying it for months, and the only reason I do it is because I don't want to get into fistfights every 5 minutes trying to go about my life in New York City. If I'm going to be indoors with people who are at high risk and it makes them feel better, fine. Sometimes, yeah, because even then a minor benefit of limited transmission, I think, could be, and it's also less of an imposition. The problem is they keep making the imposition more and more, right? It was wear a mask if you're sick, and then it was wear a mask only indoors for extended period of time. And then, do you know how contact tracing works? They only ask you, because I had to go through this in New York City, they only ask you about people you've been around, this is if you have COVID, for 15 minutes or more indoors. So if you walk past somebody, or if you stand in an elevator with somebody, that doesn't count. So the contact tracers that we were supposed to rely on to, and remember when they talked about how that was necessary to get this under control? Let's talk about math. Yeah? You got a couple thousand contact tracers trying to chase down 50, 100,000 cases a day. Good luck with that. Nobody should have thought that that was a serious plan, but they did think it was a serious plan. See, I remember the things that they've told us, and I've also seen how this has been used as a political weapon at every opportunity in ways that are disingenuous, in ways that I think also are destructive. By pushing the balance here, because there should be a balance between public health and public freedom, by pushing the balance entirely in favor of public health at the expense of our most basic freedoms, and changing that risk calculation so dramatically, they've also caused a lot of really horrific consequences, downside. The number of people dying from undiagnosed cancer, from drug overdoses, just the way that our public health, mental and physical health, has been deteriorating during all of this. And they want to keep this thing going. They think this is great. Fauci thinks this is a good move. You know, the only reason we weren't in this sort of like, you know, every man for himself, do your best attitude from the very beginning of this was because they told us that hospitals were going to be overwhelmed. That was how they got us into this. Oh, now we're going to have the collective, like the hive mind, determine what you can do, who you can see over Thanksgiving, and have this continuing. Okay, yay, the cases went down for a bit, but it's not because a lot of people got infected and this is just the way the virus is transmitting. You know, then the cases come up. Oh, it's because you're not doing enough. You're not doing enough, and then they make us do all these annoying things, and then it keeps spreading. It keeps spreading. But then after a few months, the cases start going on. Well, it's because you finally listened to us. That's why the cases are going down. And then the virus doesn't really spread that much in an area, and everyone's still living with these restrictions. And then all of a sudden it goes up. Oh, you're not. You know, we see how this goes. I remember what they were saying and what they've told us in the past and what they're saying now, and it doesn't add up. But you see, they think that people like me have problems with this stuff as some show of fealty to Trump. I don't give a what about the Trump view on whether I should, or the Republican view or anything else about whether I should mask sitting down in a restaurant, like as in going to sit down and then sit there and eat for 2 hours without a mask on. I don't care what anyone, that's idiotic. I don't care what Fauci says. I don't care what anyone says. That's the dumbest policy. And that is the policy in New York City. And I think it's the policy in other places too, probably in Los Angeles, where they have the mask up between bites of food. You know, that's also the kind of mentality that leads us to have people who are supposedly health experts. And look, the health community and a lot of doctors have looked like complete jackasses throughout this whole thing. A lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them. Wear a mask during sexual relations. Now, look, I mean, whatever you do with the husband or the missus behind closed doors is your own business. But I'm saying wear a surgical mask to protect you from COVID while you're doing the horizontal mambo. There are real articles. You can find them where that's actual medical guidance that's out there. We're supposed to think that that's not dumb beyond words. Look, when people get really scared, they do stupid things. They say stupid things. And they're very easy to control. And that's what has been happening. And Democrats have liked this. What they really don't want is for you to spend any time thinking about how much they've been wrong in the past, what they used to say, because a normal person who's not in the grip of fear would listen to what they were saying now with keeping in mind that they've said stuff before that wasn't exactly making a whole lot of sense, was it? Yeah. Here you go. We have 14. Play it.
Just you and me wearing these masks, what Dr. Fauci and what Dr. Schuchat have said is that could actually sometimes be more harmful to you than not wearing a mask, because if it's not fitted right, you're going to fumble with it. You're going to be touching your face, which is the number one way you're going to get disease, is unclean hands touching your face.
In terms of wearing a mask, our advice is clear that wearing a mask if you don't have an infection really reduces the risk, almost not at all. So we do not advise that.
Well, it's important for folks to know that face masks are not recommended for the general public. There are two things people should know. Number one, if you wear a face mask and you're not wearing it properly, you're going to be more likely to touch your face, and you can actually increase your risk of getting a respiratory disease like coronavirus or flu.
Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask. When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet but it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is.
That guy, we are told, you heard Dr. Fauci at the end, has been working against infectious disease and pandemics for, the last 40 years? That was what he said earlier this year. Now, he looks at you like you're some kind of troglodyte if you don't immediately strap on that mask all the time. I mean, what else do you need to know, folks? But they've convinced themselves, because the left politicizes, the Democrats politicize everything. They really think that the opposition to masks is like, yeah, because Trump doesn't like masks. No, because we pay attention, and a lot of this stuff is dumb, and I don't want to wear a mask. I don't want to be in the gym alone wearing a mask, which is what happens these days. I don't want to be on a treadmill wearing a mask. You know, all you have to do, and this has happened to me a couple of times, I'm going to be honest about it. You have one or two really wet sneezes with one of those surgical masks on. You change your mind on wearing masks all the time real fast. They think it's all about politics. That's because that's how they view everything. I want this to end. If Joe Biden came out and he was like, look, I think everybody should do this for their own safety, but we're not going to mandate this. It's not the government's role. There's not the science to back up taking this position anyway. And we know that as a policy, it just aggravates people, exacerbates divisions, and it hasn't worked in Europe. So do whatever you want to protect yourself, but none of this, like, you can't go into this place. If a private business wants to, fine, but that's not what we have. We have government mandates for businesses. No more of that. I'd say, yeah, I like what Biden's saying on masks. That's where, I mean, you say, oh, well, he'd never switch his mind like that. Listen to Fauci. Listen how he switched his tune on this one. You know, the mask, maybe it works a little bit. Yes, maybe it works a little bit. Not enough to annoy the crap out of everybody with these stupid mandates and this virtue signaling of masking all the time. If you're in a room with somebody who's shedding this virus and you both have little pieces of cloth on your face and you're breathing in the same air for, an extended period of time, you're at risk. End of story. So all this stuff, oh, but I'm wearing a mask. And if you're wearing a respirator, if you want to go around in a hazmat suit and have something that's actually filtering out particles so small that it would include the virus before you can breathe anything in, and it's keeping it from being able to get to your, yeah, sure. But, do you want to live in like a scene from the movie Outbreak for the rest of your life? I don't think so. But I'm sorry. I just can't help but notice they think that this is like, yeah, MAGA, Trump, I'm not wearing a mask. No, it's a dumb idea, and I don't want to do it. Because I actually think about things irrespective of what the political party decides. I recently got a crash course in home title theft, and you better pray this crime never happens to you because it can ruin you financially. Here's how it works. Cyber thieves find your home's title online because it exists there. It's on servers. It's in the cloud. And then they use a quitclaim deed to kick you off, put themselves on, and then take out loans against the equity in your home. You often won't find out about this until you get payment demands in the mail or perhaps even a foreclosure notice. You have to go with the experts I trust at Home Title Lock. They can create a virtual barrier around your home's title. All you have to do is go to HomeTitleLock.com and use the promo code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. You can also check at the site to see if you're a victim of this crime and don't even know it. Again, that's HomeTitleLock.com. Promo code RADIO. That will get you 30 free days of protection. And when you type in your home address, you can see if you're a victim of home title theft already, which some people are. Check it out today. Create a virtual barrier around your home's title with HomeTitleLock.com. Promo code RADIO. It's the final countdown, the last days before the big day, and we wanted to hear from the campaign just to get updates on what's going on, what they're up to, how the president's going to be making his case here. And for that, we've got our friend Steve Cortes in the mix. Steve is a senior strategist for the Trump campaign. He's out there making the case, and he's got his finger on the pulse of just what Trump 2020 is up to. Thank you so much, Steve, for joining. Appreciate it.
Hey, you bet, Buck. Happy to be here.
So, how are we looking, Steve? Give us the real deal. I mean, look, I know you and I both know Trump is, we hope, going to win, right? Okay, skip that for a second. What's happening right now?
Yeah, no, listen, let me give you reasons to be hopeful. You know, not just sloganeering. I like our momentum right now. Now, listen, we're taking nothing for granted. I believe all of these swing states are still in play, and it's going to come down to game day turnout. And when I say game day, I really mean these I should say game days, because it's through the weekend, really. But here's why I like our momentum. Number one, there's economic momentum in the country. That's really pretty fantastic. We just continue to get out day after day, just an absolute deluge of data, all of it pointing to an economic renaissance in this country. This country is surging and roaring back to life economically. It's because of the Trump policies. It's the Trump boom 2.0. And the American people cite in all polling, and I have problems with a lot of public polling, but in all polling, far and away, that is the number one issue on voters' minds. It's also where I think we have the most compelling case to make. So that's the affirmative case for Trump. And the other reason, by the way, speaking of polling, even though I don't like the numbers that a lot of public polling come up with, because I believe that their inputs are wrong and they're skewed against us, I do think that momentum matters in polling. In other words, if it's tightening versus widening, that does matter, as long as they're not changing the methodology, right? And if we look at the Real Clear Politics averages of these swing states, all of them are tightening. So those averages still show us losing those swing states. Now, I don't believe we are, but regardless, they show us losing by less. They show these races tightening, and I think that is accurate. And then the other reason is, quite frankly, the word is getting out about the Biden-China pay-to-play scheme. This is the biggest story of the campaign. I mean, clearly, this is a bombshell story. The fact that the Biden family, which I really call a cartel because that's what it operates like, that they have been selling influence and access all over the world for years, but including to the two most dangerous enemies of the United States, Russia and China. And to get really specific, that much is proven, by the way. I mean, that's not supposition, right? It is proven that Hunter was being paid and other family members being paid lavishly by the Chinese Communist Party. Now, what is credibly alleged, and I want to be precise with my words, Buckeye, because we can't quite prove it yet, but there is very credible evidence to suspect and to believe that Joe Biden himself was involved in this scam, in a dirty money deal with the CCP, that he was personally involved in executing it and in the proceeds. That question has, of course, not been asked of him in any legitimate way other than by President Trump. The campaign hardly addresses the issue because they hardly campaign at all. And despite the efforts of corporate media making a willful decision to ignore the biggest story in the country with a nice assist from big tech suppressing the story is getting out. And it is helping us. And we're seeing that in some internal numbers. The negatives on Joe Biden are going up. The American people are realizing he's not the nice guy from Scranton that the corporate media wants you to believe. He's a dirty Washington politician who spent 50 years in the swamp and much of that time screwing over American workers and taking dirty money from communist China.
We're speaking to Steve Cortes, Trump 2020 campaign advisor, senior advisor for strategy, and a former CNN contributor alumni, just like me. So, Steve, yes. We've got that. It's like we've both survived some kind of a war, so we've always got that in common.
That's right.
Yeah, crazy place over there, man. It just kept getting crazier, too, but we'll have that conversation another day. Steve, let's talk about the Hispanic vote in this.
Sure.
There have been some news reports, that Hispanic voters, there's two dynamics playing out. One, they're not showing up for Biden in places like southern Florida, Miami-Dade County as much as had been hoped. And two, some of them may be breaking for Trump in larger numbers than had been anticipated. What can you tell us about that?
Yes, listen, no, that is absolutely happening, correct on both counts. And by the way, again, I don't love public polling, but just to cite the latest Fox News national poll, and I'm not cherry picking a good poll because that poll didn't make us look good, but within that poll, the Hispanic number was pretty outstanding. They showed 42% nationally among Hispanics. We believe we're doing slightly better than that, and we think we're going to have a shot at actually winning the Hispanic vote, but certainly north of 40 in our view. We're not being cocky about it. We've got to earn those votes all the way to the finish line. But a couple things are going on. Number one is Hispanics are statistically the most entrepreneurial demographic in America. We love to start up new businesses, mom and pop operations that we hope become bigger than that. And this president has been amazing for entrepreneurs, particularly when it comes to deregulation. Tax cuts were key, but I think for entrepreneurs, it's the regulatory relief that is really the jet fuel for entrepreneurial zeal in this country. And Hispanics know that. They know what was happening during the first 3 years before the China virus, and they know what's happening again right now in this country. I'll give you one other quick stat that I think is related. Pickup truck sales just hit an all-time high in the month of September, which is pretty astounding when you consider consider, that just 5 months ago, this country was locked down, right? So the fact that we're back up, we've reclaimed the pandemic losses in truck sales and surged to a new high in pickup trucks is amazing. And the reason I'm connecting that to Hispanics is pickup trucks are used for work. They're used for the trades. A lot of Hispanics work in those kinds of businesses, construction, landscaping, all those sorts of things. People who work with their minds and their hands. The people Hillary Clinton decries as the deplorables. So the Hispanic population, particularly Hispanic men, are really rallying to President Trump. And then specific to Florida, as you mentioned, Dade County, Florida's Hispanics are different in that so many of them come from Venezuela and Cuba that they are keenly aware of the dangers of socialism, right? Because either they or their ancestors fled from those brutal regimes in Venezuela and Cuba. And when the 2020 Democratic Party lurches to the left and starts to dance with socialists like Bernie Sanders and AOC, that may be very pleasing in faculty lounges and cafes in Brooklyn. But it's not cool in South Florida. It is not okay with Venezuelans and with Americans of Venezuelan and Cuban descent down there. So I think they have really hurt themselves with that community, and we're benefiting. Speaking
of Steve Cortes, Trump 2020 campaign senior advisor for strategy. So, Steve, there's only a few days left here. What is, I know the president's, he's going all out. He's at that point in the race where the legs are kicking and he's giving it all he's got, as is everybody else who's a part of his campaign team, yourself included. If he's going to focus in, though, on one or two things in those swing states where, based on what we've seen so far, based on what the data is telling the campaign, he could still move the needle, what is it?
Yeah, listen, I think it's the economy, and to get even more specific than broad economy, I would say income. And I've spoken to the president about this, and he's armed with some statistics on the, you can break down the Bureau of Labor Statistics when they do their monthly payroll reports. Most people obviously just focus on the national, but they break it down actually all the way to metro area. So let me give you a specific example. Today, he's going to Rochester, Minnesota. Rochester, Minnesota, the income gains there, as of the September report, are year over year 13%. Average wage gains in Rochester, Minnesota. That's pretty incredible when you consider that most of this year has been marred by COVID, right? And that's a tough comparison because you're comparing to September of 2019. It's year over year. The economy was humming last fall, right? And nobody had even heard of the China virus yet. So it's a tough comp. Not only are we beating it, but we're beating it by double digits. I mean, that's real money in people's pockets. That's hundreds of extra dollars every single week for working class folks that they have gained in the last year. The more I think the president points that out and points out that is all at risk if you elect Joe Biden. He's going to inflict the largest tax hike in American history by a mile on this country. He would also take us back to a place of economic submission to China. And again, in Minnesota, according to the Economic Policy Institute, which is a left-leaning think tank, Minnesota lost 88,000 manufacturing jobs to China once they entered the WTO in 2001. Joe Biden was a principal architect of those terrible trade deals that allowed China to abuse our American workers, including in Minnesota. So I think we make that kind of granular case as he's barnstorming the country. This is what you have gained. This is what's at risk. I think it's compelling, and I think that will get people to the polls.
Steve, if you had to tell us one place where you think, if I'm putting you on the spot here, but don't worry, we'll only this is what we do. We'll only bring it up again if you're right. But if there's one place where you think people could be a little surprised, not necessarily just that Trump wins, but by the margin of victory, that, is there one area where you think we could get a surprise that defies expectations? I'm sorry, state, I mean.
I'm happy to put myself out there. I'm going to stick with Minnesota. I think not only are we going to win Minnesota, I think we're going to win it handily. Minnesota has not been won by a Republican since 1972. That's the year I was born, and I'm not a young man, Buck. By the way, that was also the year that Joe Biden was elected in the Senate. Think about that. I mean, I'm a middle-aged guy. He was elected when I was in diapers in 1972. But anyway, I believe we're going to win Minnesota. Let me give you a couple reasons why. One is Ilhan Omar. I can't tell you how despised she is in that entire state outside of her district. And she has been really useful for us to point out just how radical left the 2020 Democratic Party is, to convince Minnesotans that this is not your parents or your grandparents' Democratic Party. This is not the Walter Mondale Party. This is it's Ilhan Omar's party. They are driving the bus as far as policy. And then the second thing, I mean, it's tragic, but it's the reality. It's just the riots. The riots in Minneapolis were so terrible. They caused so much damage in this country, and really, frankly, legitimately scared, rightfully scared a lot of people, particularly Minnesotans. So I think those two factors, in addition to the affirmative case that we're making on the economy, tell me that we're going to make history in Minnesota, and I don't think we're going to just eke it out. I think we're going to win.
That's a bold prediction, Steve Cortes. We like that stuff though here. Thanks so much for joining me. Steve Cortes, senior advisor for the Trump campaign. Everybody, Steve, we'll talk to you soon. It is up. It is out. The Real Dracula podcast, just in time for Halloween, my friends, as promised. So for those of you who are listening on one of our wonderful affiliate stations all across the country, we've got 180 stations, give or take. I know some of you probably maybe don't listen to podcasts. This is only available right now on podcast. So it's a great way to introduce yourself to that medium. And look, it's about Vlad III, Vlad Tepes, who is quite a figure from history. Yes, a sadistic, mass-murdering, impaling maniac in some ways, but also a pretty effective military commander and a guy who lived in an incredible time and fought against the Ottoman Turks and maybe saved Europe. You could make the argument, or at least was a part of saving Europe from Ottoman conquest. Amazing story, and I think you'll really enjoy this podcast. So you just go to wherever you want to listen to podcasts. The iHeart app is a great one. Spotify, super easy. Type in the Buck Sexton Show, and then just remember, it'll say Shields High, the Real Dracula, under the Buck Sexton Show feed when you go to it. And then it's free. This is totally free. I just want you to listen. And there's some violence described, impalements and so on. So, I don't know if it's little kid acceptable, but I think your 12 or 13-year-olds and up can definitely listen to it. And it's all real history. I mean, it's the actual story. I did a tremendous amount of research. I've got several books on Vlad the Impaler that I read in order to prepare for this. So I think you'll really enjoy it. And for the adults, you got to know this story. You'll never think of Dracula whenever he's like, I want to suck your blood, that whole thing. You'll never really look at him the same way. You'll never really think of the Dracula figure. And I get into a little bit of the Strigoi or the Strigoica, which is the Romanian sort of peasant folklore about demons from the area. And there's all these sort of scientific explanations for where this notion of vampirism came from. It might be from decaying bodies because they didn't understand that decay process, and it looks like blood has been sucked out of the dead. But anyway, there's a lot there. And then the name Dracula itself, in contemporary Romanian language at the time, it wasn't called Romanian, but the various dialects that were being spoken in, because you had Vlad Tepes would have been speaking, he probably spoke German, he would have spoken, various Eastern European regional dialects. Romania as a country did not exist at the time, which is where Wallachia is, the province, and it's really a principality of Hungary, so he would have spoken Hungarian, he would have spoken Turkish, spoken some German because of the Saxon transplants from Germany into this area. Anyway, it's just really cool, and I think you'll enjoy it. It's only about 45 minutes or so, too. Perfect listening. So while you're making dinner this weekend and putting out the pumpkins and letting the kids carve some stuff, if you want to listen to The Real Dracula, and please, team, do share it, because we want more and more people to know about the Shields High History podcasts. I already have one Siege of Malta podcast done, and we're going to do another to complete the siege, and then we're going to move to 2-part Lepanto podcast, and then maybe Siege of Vienna 1, Siege of Vienna 2, and then we're going to move on to a different era of history. So I want to make sure we move around a little bit, and I think we'll probably go to ancient Greece and maybe then ancient Rome. I got a lot of ideas. So you can also give me your thoughts on what you'd like for the Shields High podcast. Great battles, great military, historical stories. So I hope you enjoy it, folks. We got it done as promised, and it's, like I said, just all you have to do is go to the various podcast platforms out there. It's totally free. Listen to it on demand whenever you want. Please share it with a friend. All righty. We also have some other stuff to get to here. What do the Democrats do when their plans don't work? They just blame everybody other than themselves. No accountability. That's one of their favorite things. No accountability at all. Perfect example of this would be the worst mayor in America, Bill de Blasio. Here he is on why we haven't gotten more stimulus money. Play 18.
I had this conversation even with President Trump back in the spring when I was communicating with him pretty regularly during the worst of the New York City crisis. And I said to him, if you would speak up for a stimulus, you would move the Senate with you. we'd be done here. He's never done it. You know, in the last few weeks, he suddenly got a little interested because he needed to get reelected. But no, look, if President Trump had said from the beginning, a stimulus is the way forward, if he had learned a lesson of Franklin Delano Roosevelt and other great leaders, we would already have that stimulus. This city and a lot of other places would be in the middle of our comeback right now. He did not provide the leadership. He literally wouldn't even comment on it for weeks on end. That was the lost opportunity.
So de Blasio is an unrepentant liar, as you know. And the idea that if we just had a stimulus, New York City would be doing great is crazy because New York City is dying because he insists on the maximum. We have restrictions in New York City that no one else even in New York State has. We're just treated like the worst of the worst here with the COVID lockdowns. But he also is leaving out that the reason there's not a stimulus package is because Nancy Pelosi wanted a whole bunch of Democrat grab bag stuff. They wanted a whole bunch of things that have nothing to do with the stimulus. But it is something that everybody should remember as we get ready to go to the polls, that at a time of so much economic and emotional and psychological suffering for the country and frustration. I mean, the word for me, I just feel frustrated by all this stuff. Like, it really grates on me. The party of Nancy Pelosi thought that it was more important to score political points than get help to people. And I hope they remember that in this election. I hope they remember that that's what the priority list was for Nancy Pelosi.